It's great to be chatting today to Dr. Dawn Harper. Dawn is a doctor, TV presenter and author, probably best known for co-presenting Channel 4's Embarrassing Bodies. Hi Dawn, thank you so much for sparing the time
Absolute pleasure.
chat today. So you're known as a TV doctor. Are you still practicing as a GP?
Very much so, yeah. So, I mean, I think certainly, actually, you just mentioned Embarrassing Bodies. So when it was on air initially, my kids were all in their teens. They hated it. They were so embarrassed by it. But especially my youngest, when he'd say, "What are you doing today, Mum?" Because my diary's a little bit topsy-turvy. And whenever I say, I'm in surgery today, he'd say, "Oh, good, you're going to be a proper doctor." They hated the TV thing. But yeah, very much so. So I'm a GP first and foremost. That's what I trained to do.
Yeah.
The television thing kind of came along, or when it first came along, I actually said, "No way, I don't want to do it." But I'm glad I did. And the two actually work together really nicely. You know, I think sometimes in the world of television, people might push you to want to do or say something that isn't actually grassroots. It's not what real people are worrying about. And at the same time, the other way around is I think sometimes working in TV means that I'm kind of kept up to date with stuff which actually feeds back into general practice quite nicely. So the two kind of dovetail quite nicely together, really.
That's brilliant. And is there any particular area of health that you're passionate about?
So for the first 10 years in my GP career, I was the only lady partner in a 7-doctor practice. So you can imagine I saw quite a lot of women's health.
Sure.
We now have other lady doctors in the practice, which is lovely, but I've always maintained an interest in women's health. And then I guess as a natural aside from that, then children's health was quite an important part for me, because of course if you go and see a particular doctor, then the chances are you'll probably take your kids to see that doctor if that's somebody that you have a relationship with. And I think really importantly now, and something I'm working on a new project which is really trying to champion preventative health. I feel very strongly that I think we've had generations of rights within the NHS, you know, and that's great. We're so lucky, although I know things are creaking a bit at the moment, but you know, we are lucky to have a health service that's free at the point of access. And we've had a lot of stuff, haven't you? You'll have seen all the headlines that, you know, a right to be seen within 4 hours in A&E, a right to choose and book your specialist, a right to be seen by a healthcare professional within 48 hours. And those are all, you know, laudable, but I think we really have got to the point now in the UK where we need to be a bit more honest about responsibility too. And I think, you know, I have different hats. You know, I'm an individual, I'm a mum, I'm a GP, I'm a presenter, I'm an author. And each of those hats, I think, there is something that I can do to take responsibility for my own health and for those around me. So, preventative health, I think, is really important. You know, so much of what we see in general practice has a lifestyle element. Nearly everything has a lifestyle element. So, you know, the what we do for ourselves and to ourselves can have a huge impact, not just on us individually, but also on the health service as a whole.
Well, prevention, what's that saying?
Prevention's better than cure.
And how did you first get into TV? How did that come about?
Okay, to praise it, I've always done other things alongside general practice. And I was at a drinks party actually with met a GP there who was developing a website where he wanted a lady doctor to answer email queries. And so I went and bought my first computer. And I used to put the kids to bed and then sit and, you know, answer questions. And I had a question from a lady about her smear result. And in those days, as the only lady partner, it was before nurses were doing smears. I did, that was my kind of bread and butter, really. So I explained it to her, and she wrote me this lovely reply saying, "Gosh, you know, I really thought I was going to be 6 foot under pushing up daisies before my kids went to school," kind of thing. And you've made me feel so much better. I'm actually a health editor for a magazine. Would you write for me? So I started writing
Yeah.
for her, and then she moved to another magazine. So I stayed with the original one and got another one. And then she phoned me up and said, Channel 4 wants to speak to you.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no way, no way. I mean, the only photographs of me, I think, were either on a horse or on my wedding day, and I just didn't do cameras. But I went round to, I was telling friends and family, so you won't believe the conversation I've had this week. And everybody said, you should do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I phoned her back and said,
okay,
I'll audition. And actually that wasn't for Embarrassing Bodies, that Embarrassing Bodies came along later. But I remember even at the time when I started, I remember thinking, I don't know that this is me really, I don't know whether I want to do this. But I'm a great believer in opportunities taken and opportunities missed. And I remember very consciously thinking, I don't want to look back in 5 or 10 years' time and think, I wonder what if.
Yeah.
So I kind of went with it, never expecting, Embarrassing Bodies to be the success that it was. I remember when I auditioned for it, I remember saying, this isn't going to work in the UK. Why would people come on
Everyone's
air
loved it.
And show you their most embarrassing things when you've got a free health service? Take it to the States, where people can't afford that care, and that I could see it working. And I so clearly remember the exec producer saying, look, finding the contributors is my problem. If I can find them, will you really do it? And the rest is history.
Brilliant. Very, very good. And what part of the sort of, I don't know, the TV stuff do you find you enjoy? I mean, did you enjoy Embarrassing Bodies in the end?
Loved it. For a number of different reasons. So, of course, when you see a patient on Embarrassing Bodies, you see this tiny little clip, but actually their appointments with us in the clinic were an hour or two long.
Were they?
And so you really got, and interestingly, it taught me quite a lot actually about, so people would always say, nobody's seen my breasts, but here you go, Dr. Dawn, have a look.
Yes.
That isn't quite the way it happened, that's the way it was edited. But what I learned was the extreme lengths some people went to hide their symptoms, and the kind of the impact of sometimes a physical symptom on people's emotional well-being. And so
awful.
I think one of the things I loved most, so I'm the only NHS doctor, Pixie and Christian work purely privately, and they didn't get it at first because they didn't like the follow-up days particularly.
No.
But I used to love them, and they asked me why do you? I said, well, because in NHS practice we don't have the luxury of seeing people when they're better.
No.
We see people when they're poorly. We
It's
don't
lovely to see the end
routinely follow
result.
the most amazing thing was the people that when they came back, they looked 6 inches taller. They'd often had a change in their hairstyle maybe, or a completely changed wardrobe. And it was just so striking, the emotional well-being for having fixed a physical problem. And I loved that.
How rewarding.
It was, I just loved it. And I loved working with Pixie and Christian. Pixie's like an overshaken bottle of Irish Lucozade. She's just fantastic fun. So yeah, and the team behind the scenes were something special. So every contributor, had a named member of staff that they could contact, and if things went wrong, even after they'd been, on the show, we would still fix things for them. So whilst they didn't get paid, they had all their treatment for free. And if you happen to live in Gloucestershire, but the best person for your particular condition works, let's say, from Aberdeen, then the production company pay for all your travel, any necessary hotels and so on.
Wow.
So it was a pretty big juggernaut, that show, and
really
and lovely to be part of it.
Yeah. And was there anything with that, so they found, sorry, who was it, you said the producer found the
exec producer, they found the candidate,
found the contributors.
Yes.
Did they ever come to you with, I don't know, cases, and would you guys ever say, I don't think we can have this one that's televised?
So what we did was although people signed a consent form, actually the production team were very sensitive to the fact that if people didn't then change their minds and didn't want to be on air, we didn't force it
No.
because it was a very sensitive
Personal thing, isn't it?
thing to be dealing with. And I personally, they quite often would want to give you the whole story, and I'd say, look, I'm not an actress, I'm a doctor, so actually I'd much rather see you just as I would in my consulting room and have a genuine consultation, rather than trying to kind of fake it. So no, and actually what was interesting was, as the show became more and more popular, we saw more and more people who perhaps had seen several doctors, and because it became a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that it was a success in a way, because some of the top doctors in the country would come to us either wanting to show off how brilliant they were, or maybe boost their private practice. So they would volunteer their time for free, and the patients knew that in exchange for coming on television, they probably would get to see, you know, the best doctor for their condition. So it was a really, it was a real feel-good factor time to work.
And you've written lots of books focusing on different areas of health. Can you tell us, do you think, your top 3 tips for a healthy life?
Okay. Yeah, I probably can, I think. Well, I don't know.
I mean, I know there's so many. But...
I'll tell you what, my most recent book was called Live Well to 101.
Oh, yes.
And I started off by interviewing centenarians who were living independently. So there was nobody in a nursing home waiting for God. These were people living at home independently. And I interviewed people both here in the UK and on the continent. And you can imagine I had incredibly varied stories. Some born into immense privilege, you know, beautiful country houses with a full complement of staff. And there was one chap I interviewed in Italy who used to walk to and from school 5 miles every day barefoot because his family couldn't afford shoes. So very, very different stories. But I tell you what, the thing that really hit me, and I'm going to be greedy and go for more than 3, I think.
That's fine.
But what really hit me was what they had in common. So these were all people who were born pre-motor car.
Okay.
So they walked. Okay. They didn't go and do a spin class on a Friday night or book a squash court. They didn't need one of these to tell them how many paces they did. They moved, and they carried on moving into later life. They were also born pre-fast food. So they ate seasonally, and their portions were appropriate.
You know, enormous.
A piece of fish was this, not this. They were positive thinkers. They all they didn't let stress get to them. Now, okay, you could argue that it was a slower pace of life maybe, and now they've been retired for many, many years, but even through their working lives, they were positive thinkers. They all had a faith. They were brought up when it was normal to go to church, and they'd maintained that faith. And I think perhaps the quirky one that I would say to everyone is, because I was by definition interviewing people who were over 100, bar one couple, they all lived on their own. You know, they'd lost their spouses sometimes decades previously. So they lived on their own. Not one of them told me they were lonely. They maintained social contact. And that was very strong, that message. So I would say, you know, move, eat seasonally, do something to make yourself smile every day, and keep in touch. Keep in touch with other people. You know, Giuseppe was 102, I think, and he would walk down to the village square in Aciroli on the coast in Italy, and he'd be drinking red wine and playing cards with his friends by 11 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, brilliant. What a nice life. What a nice life. So moving on to sort of now and what's happening now, there's some horrendous bugs going around, it seems. Do you think that because our immune systems have been sort of sheltered from bugs for so long, you know, probably 2 or 3 years, do you think that that's sort of stopped us from...
It's a little
Hello,
friend.
doggies. Do you think that's made our immune systems weaker, or do you think that it could have something to do with the vaccine that we might not know?
No, okay, so I think there are a number of reasons why. So when we were all locked down, it wasn't just COVID that we weren't passing around. It was all the other viruses that we tend to get in the winter months. Now, of course, because we haven't been exposed to those, our immune systems haven't developed an immunity to a lot of the viruses that are circulating in the winter months. So we are more vulnerable. We are also now, thankfully, out of lockdown. So we are all mixing more. So I think there are a number of reasons why, sadly, we are seeing an awful lot of coughs and colds, and it's what's contributing to this huge pressure in the NHS at the moment.
So you don't think that it's got anything to do with the fact that the vaccines, I don't know, we've all had lots of vaccines recently?
No, I often get asked by mums worrying about the number of vaccines that we give to our young babies, and mums sometimes worrying about whether or not their immune systems can really handle all of this. And what I always say, first thing I say is that all 3 of my children had all of their vaccines. And if I had babies or if I have grandchildren on the way, I would hope that they all will too. And I think sometimes actually giving that personal story is as reassuring as any amount of research that you can give people. You put your own money where your mouth is. They know that you would, But actually, newborns are exposed to all sorts of bugs and viruses and so on that their immune systems need to mount a response to. So actually they are very well equipped to be able to deal with those. And I think vaccines are probably, I know that there has been a lot of concern over the COVID vaccine, and people were very frightened that maybe it had been fast tracked. But actually our vaccines are very safe. They are probably one of the greatest influences on our health. I wrote a piece for a magazine a few years ago now comparing what people died of in Victorian times compared to today. And of course, in Victorian times, it wasn't heart disease and cancer, it was infections. And so our vaccines are very safe. They have contributed to healthy longevity without a doubt. And in terms of the COVID vaccine in particular, people have often asked me, well, how did they get it to market so quickly? And actually what they did was they didn't cut any corners, but instead of doing phase 1, 2, 3 trials sequentially, they did everything together. Which was taking a bit of a gamble, because that's a huge investment if then it didn't work or it falls from market for whatever reason. And they also, normally what happens is you complete all of these trials and then you submit to the JCVI, the Joint Committee on Vaccinations and Immunisations. What they did with the COVID vaccines was they were producing data as it emerged, so that the JCVI could fast track the assessment. So no corners were cut, but they had to do that, and because of course we were in a race against time.
Really were. So if another, what do you reckon, if another super variant that vaccines can't cover comes along, do you think that locking down is the answer again?
Well, I think
it's very hard to know,
it's very hard to know, but I do think it's important that we go back and we look back now and we are critical about, I think it's very easy to criticise at the time, but of course we were having to react very quickly. And I remember changing my mind. I was still going to the gym in Cirencester, and various people saying, "Oh, well, I'm glad you're here because you must."
If you're here, then it's fine.
I remember thinking, what's the big fuss? Unfortunately, we lose up to 20,000 people a year from flu. But the difference was twofold. One was how quickly the COVID virus was spreading, but 2 was that it was behaving quite unpredictably. So whilst flu picks off the frail and the elderly, I remember right at the beginning being really genuinely scared going to work, because we didn't know. We know so much more now,
wasn't it?
Totally.
Slightly. Am I going to be the one that actually it really attacks?
Young previously fit people in intensive care. It was quite scary.
Yeah, very scary, very scary. We've got thousands of members, Grapevine members, a fair few who will have had or have long COVID. Is there anything, do you think, that the medical profession are now suggesting that can help these sufferers?
So long COVID is really interesting. You would expect, wouldn't you, that those who have been more ill or perhaps in intensive care with COVID would be more prone to long COVID, and that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing some people with very mild initial infection then going on to getting long COVID. There's a chap, I think he's in Norfolk, an anaesthetist, who was off for months with brain fog because he said he just didn't feel safe. So often these are people who were previously very fit, often kind of, marathon runners.
I had it. I felt ill for nearly a year. Yeah, actually.
And often, so somebody like you who is fit, active, not used to being unwell, I think it can be incredibly frustrating for people. Yeah. So we're still learning, and I think probably the gold standard treatment will be a team approach.
Yes.
Because you need, depending on how long COVID affects you as an individual, we need input from physiotherapists, from respiratory physicians, maybe from psychiatrists, maybe from neurologists. Yeah. So actually what we're starting to see is these clinics setting up which have got input that you can then cherry pick for the individual. And we're still learning. We're still learning. Yeah. But I like you say,
it's also new actually still, isn't it? It's terribly new.
But for you to feel not yourself for a year.
It's just rude. But also the interesting thing is every time I've had a vaccine, I have felt shocking for about 4 or 5 days.
Really? So that's the way your immune system
I haven't had my fourth one yet because I'm like thinking I don't want to feel it again.
I must say, actually, my fourth one, bless her heart, the nurse that gave me my fourth one, I didn't even feel it go in.
Didn't you?
No.
Brilliant. Genius.
She was wonderful.
That's very good. So moving on to... So you went on Celebrity Island with Bear Grylls.
Yes.
What was that like as an experience?
Right. I remember I tracked down one of the doctors who'd been on the Ordinary series, and he was quite interesting. And he said, "Do it." He said, "Do it. You will. It is life changing or life affirming."
Okay.
And he said, halfway through, you will scream at the sky and say he flipping lied to me because you will hate it. It was really unusual, Panda. So I have never been so hungry or dehydrated or exhausted. You don't get a glass of water off camera, okay? There is nothing. You literally, so there were 14 of us on the island for just over 2 weeks. And in that time, we ate... I think 4 fish, that sort of size, one turkey, a load of limpets. There's a reason why you'll never see limpet, no matter how much garlic you put on a limpet. And an alligator. We had a small alligator, and that was all we ate between 14 of us in 2 weeks. We were starving.
That's nothing.
But what was really interesting was at night, we went in the dry season, so the ground was too hard for us to make beds above the ground. We couldn't get anything into the ground.
Right, yeah.
So we literally had palm fronds that we would just lie on the ground, and the sun goes down like a stone and up like a curtain. It's really just good. And of course, you don't have a watch. You know, if you wake up at 3 a.m, the first thing you probably do is look at your watch and think, oh good, I've got another 3 hours before I've got to get up.
But you have no idea.
But you have no idea whether you've got 3 minutes or 3 hours.
That's quite such a...
And also, you don't want to move, because if you move and there's a sign, everybody goes, what's that?
Oh,
so you're just left there with your thoughts. And we had no contact with the outside world at all. So before we went, we had to fill in a document to say under what circumstances we would like to be taken off the island.
Right.
And I wrote on mine, ask Jack. And basically, what I said to him was, I want to stay for the duration. I do not want to be pulled off. So if something happens to one of my parents and they are coping and they don't need, I don't want to know about it, because as soon as I know about it, I've got to come home.
Yes.
But if they need me,
then of course,
then pull me out. Yeah. But so you had no contact with the outside world, just your thoughts. And that previous doctor was right. It was life affirming for me.
Sure.
I thought, actually, no, I'm in a good place. But it was,
God, well done.
It was really brutal. Really brutal.
And being, because you were the doctor for the thing, did you sort of find that because you had that role, did that sort of, I don't know, did that change things?
It did a bit.
Because,
so we had to be microphoned, and we had cameras in the camp, and we had 4 cameramen who were part of the team. So there were cameras on us 24/7. And I got some driftwood, and I created this little area just outside of camp, and I got a piece of wood and carved clinic into it, and we agreed that if anybody wanted to speak to me, that we would take microphones off them.
Fine,
that wasn't, I'm sure the execs were really cross with me at the time, but I felt it was important that people could just sound off if they wanted to. And interestingly, I remember on a kind of day 2 or 3, they wanted me to be the leader, and I remember saying, no, I can't do that and be your doctor.
No.
And actually I think it's important, and to be honest with you, mostly it was emotional health. People were really struggling. They were so hungry.
You probably needed a doctor for you.
No,
who could you go to?
I think I'd kind of in preparation before I went, I actually had some hypnotherapy.
Did you?
Because I'm a very non-confrontational person, so if there is a confrontation of any sort, my natural response is to withdraw.
Yeah.
And of course you can't do that. You can't get away from it when you're all living in a camp on a deserted island. And I don't know whether it was the hypnotherapy or whether it was just maybe because I had thought about this eventuality before I went. But I was the only person whilst we were there who didn't have some sort of meltdown. Either throwing or kicking something in temper, or just bursting into tears, or shouting at somebody. Everybody had a moment of meltdown, and I don't know whether it was the hypnotherapy, but I was okay.
Well done. That's brilliant. Would you ever, I don't know, be keen to go on any other reality things like, I don't know, I'm a Celebrity?
No.
Those disgusting things.
No.
Or Strictly, or anything like that.
The one I would, interestingly, the one I've always said I would love to do, but I'm 60 this year, and I think probably I'm not as flexible as I'd like to be, but I would have loved to have done Strictly. When I was a kid, I said,
do it.
When I was a kid, I had 2 potential career choices. One was to be a doctor, and the other was, showing my age, to be one of Pan's people.
Oh wow.
And I think my parents decided that maybe medicine was a slightly more secure career. But yeah, I would have loved to have done Strictly.
Well, you still can, I'm sure. Still can. And do you have any other sort of, I don't know, life or career bucket list things you think I really want to do?
I'm working on a project which is based locally at the moment, called Reach 100, and it's about promoting self-help. And going back to what we talked about right at the beginning, about prevention, not cure. And I would really love to be able to do something that really makes a difference for our NHS, because I kind of think of the NHS like mum. So I say, for most of us, mum has always been around, and as such it's quite easy to take her for granted, maybe find fault. But actually, for most of us, mum has got our best interests at heart, and I do believe that we could lose the NHS in my lifetime. And so I think anything that we can do to kind of protect mum and look after her. So that would be my kind of, that would be the next thing I'd like to do, make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. And where would you sort of finish, coming to the end of our chat, where would you say your dream holiday would be? What's your dream trip?
Oh goodness, do you know what? So we got married last year and we went to Mauritius, which was utterly wonderful. But then we do very different holidays. We love walking, so we love, there's nothing I love more. We've got 4 Jack Russell Terriers, and around here there are sheep everywhere, and our dogs are this size, so stock fencing doesn't even slow them down. So I have to walk them on the lead. So I absolutely love watching them just run amok on a beach.
Lovely.
We love cycling. So just pre-lockdown, we cycled from Lake Garda to Venice. That was amazing.
God, how far is that? Quite far.
Yeah, we did it in about 4 or 5 days, I think. It was really lovely. We've done London to Paris a few times for charity. So You
Wow.
know, there's just there isn't one particular holiday really.
No.
I do think that when we were all forced to not travel, we are so lucky here in the UK. We've got so much to enjoy.
We are.
So,
We're very, very lucky,
yeah.
aren't we? And we're lucky to be in the countryside. And last question. If you had a dinner party and you could have 3 people, dead or alive,
okay.
at your dinner party, who would they be?
Right, well, I would want 3 dinner parties with one person.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so they're obviously very popular.
First would be Jesus Christ, for very obvious reasons.
Yes.
Second would have to be Nelson Mandela.
Yes.
Who I think,
choice.
I mean, we went to actually South Africa as another holiday, and to spend some time on Robben Island was so brilliant. I think he's just, the forgiveness and the dignity that man had was just something else.
Yeah.
And the third person would be Michael Parkinson,
Okay,
because actually he's interviewed everybody else that I'd like to meet.
Yes,
so I can
great.
chat to him.
You can ask him about everything. Great choices. Great choices. Dawn, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It was really great to chat. And
apologies for the little people.
Doesn't matter. We all love doggies. We don't mind about that. Ooh.
Oh, I see.